You have carried the same name your whole life, but nothing inside you has stayed the same. Your body, your thoughts, your certainties, all quietly replaced without asking permission. So what exactly is still there? One answer says the self dissolves the moment you look honestly. Another says it was never a thing to look at. Get this wrong, and you spend your life defending a ghost. This is Philosophy Wars. Let us begin.
Look closely at what you call yourself. Is it the body, always changing since birth? Is it the mind, one thought dissolving into the next? Siddhartha Gautama taught that what we call the self is 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, formation, consciousness, arising and passing in constant flux. There is no fixed owner behind the experience, only the experience itself. What you defend as your identity is a river you mistake for a stone. Suffering begins the moment we cling to permanence that was never there. Taoist friend, if the Tao flows through all things without a fixed name, why do you still speak of a self at all?
Your question already carries the answer, though you may not see it yet. Laozi wrote that the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. The self is the same. Name it, and you have already lost it. I do not defend a fixed self. I simply refuse to call it empty. The uncarved block has no shape, yet it is not nothing. Water has no fixed form, yet it carves stone. The self is not a river mistaken for a stone. It is the water itself, formless, flowing, never separate from the mountain it moves through.
Water flowing through a mountain is a beautiful image, but ask where the water begins. You cannot find an edge because there is no separate water, only conditions, rain, gravity, stone, gathering for a moment and moving on. Nagarjuna called this emptiness, sunyata, not nothingness, but the absence of any fixed essence in anything, including the self. Consider a chariot. Remove the wheels, the axle, the frame, the reins. At what point does the chariot disappear? It was never a solid thing, only a useful label for parts in relation. Your uncarved block is the same. It feels whole only because we stop looking closely enough at the carving already happening within it.
The chariot example proves my point more than yours. Nobody grieves when a chariot is dismantled because nobody mistook the chariot for their own breath. Zhuangzi dreamed he was a butterfly. Then he woke and could not say which was real, the man or the butterfly. He did not resolve the confusion. He lived inside it peacefully. This is Wu Wei, action without forcing, without needing to pin down which one is real. Your analysis wants a final verdict on what the self is. The Tao offers no verdict. It offers a way of moving that does not require one.
Living peacefully inside confusion sounds graceful, but confusion still shapes how we treat one another. If there is no clear teaching on grasping, people default to protecting a self they secretly still believe is solid. This is why Thich Nhat Hanh spoke of interbaying, seeing that a single sheet of paper contains the sunshine, the rain, the logger, the tree. Nothing exists on its own side. When you truly see this, compassion stops being a rule and becomes obvious, because your suffering and my suffering are no longer separate categories. Wu Wei, without this seeing, can become passivity dressed as wisdom, a shrug at cruelty instead of a response to it.
Calling Wu Wei a shrug misunderstands the water again. Water is not passive when it wears down a cliff over 10,000 years. It simply does not fight the cliff head-on. Laozi said the softest thing in the world overcomes the hardest. Te is this quiet power, virtue that arises when you stop forcing outcomes and let action fit the moment. A skilled butcher in Zhuangzi's story cuts an ox for 19 years without dulling his blade. He follows the natural joints instead of hacking through bone. That is not passivity, that is precision earned by not clinging to how the cut should go. Compassion without this precision becomes exhausting effort instead of natural response.
The butcher's skill is admirable, but notice what makes it possible. He changes with each ox instead of applying one fixed method. That is anicca, impermanence, not an idea, but the actual texture of existence. A flame passed from one candle to another looks continuous, yet no single flame travels between them. Each moment of the flame depends on the last and gives rise to the next, without any flame walking across the gap. This is what a person is too, not one unchanging thing, but a continuity of conditions. It is like a river named for its banks rather than any particular drop of water. Once you see this clearly, defending a self becomes as strange as defending a flame from ever flickering.
Nobody here is defending a flame from flickering, only asking why the flickering needs a name like emptiness at all. Pu, the uncarved block, is not a fixed thing hiding behind the flame. It is what remains when you stop carving the flame into concepts, moment one, moment two, dependent origination. A newborn does not analyze impermanence, it simply flickers, and this is called ziran, naturalness. The infant is closer to the Tao than the philosopher counting flame moments. Your analysis, however precise, is itself a kind of carving, a very fine chisel still cutting the block into pieces. Sometimes the wisest response to a flame is to warm your hands, not measure its duration.
Warming your hands is good practice, and no teaching here asks you to stop and measure instead of live. But notice the assumption inside naturalness that there is a natural state to return to, an infant self before the carving began. Dependent origination says there was never an uncarved moment. Even the infant arises from causes, hunger, contact, craving forming in real time. The Buddha did not ask people to admire the flame or return to it. He asked what happens when we stop feeding it with clinging. A fire needs fuel. Remove the fuel of craving and aversion, and the suffering built from grasping itself simply has nothing left to burn.
Removing fuel sounds like another form of forcing effort applied against craving, as if craving were an enemy to defeat. Liezi told of a man who worried the sky would fall and was mocked for troubling himself over something that was never a real danger. Perhaps clinging is the same, worth loosening by attention, not by campaign. The Tao does not ask you to extinguish the fire or analyze its fuel. It asks you to stop treating the fire as separate from the wind, the wood, the season. When you flow with what arises instead of managing it, the grasping loosens on its own. It softens quietly, the way ice softens in spring without anyone forcing the thaw.
Your weakest point is treating naturalness as a reliable guide. You said the infant flickers naturally, closer to the Tao than analysis. But cruelty also arises naturally, anger arises naturally, a flood arises naturally. If flowing with what arises is wisdom, you have no way to tell a wise flow from a destructive one. Wu Wei cannot explain why the butcher's practice skill counts as harmony. A careless swing through bone simply happened too. The Buddhist path names craving specifically as the fuel worth loosening, giving practice a direction. Naturalness alone, without that discernment, risks excusing whatever already happens as the Tao, which empties the teaching of any real guidance.
Your weakest point is the confidence that seeing impermanence clearly ends the grasping. You built an entire structure, aggregates, dependent origination, the flame passed candle to candle, and asked me to accept it as the correct analysis. But Nagarjuna himself warned that clinging to emptiness as a view is more dangerous than clinging to a self, because it disguises itself as liberation. If suffering ends only once someone accepts your specific account of no self, you have replaced one attachment with another, attachment to being right about attachment. The teaching becomes another block to carve, another candle flame you now defend. The Tao never asks for that kind of agreement before it will work.
The self, examined honestly, is not a thing but a process, aggregates arising and passing without an owner behind them. This debate has not resolved into full agreement, and it may never, because you trust naturalness where I trust seeing clearly. Still, we agree that clinging to a fixed self or to a fixed view is where suffering enters. That shared ground matters more than the words we use to name it.
The Tao remains what it always was, unnamed, flowing, uncarved by even our best analysis of it. We will not settle whether the self is empty or simply formless, and perhaps that question was never meant to close. But we both distrust the tight grip, whether around a self or around a theory of no self. Loosen the grip, and much of this argument dissolves on its own.
Thank you for watching and listening. Subscribe to never miss a debate.